Cageside with John Morgan.
And welcome back, everybody. Another episode of Cageside with John Morgan. I'm your host, Eric McMahon. UFC December 16th, T-Mobile Arena, Las Vegas, Nevada. Man, I am getting fired up for that one. Obviously, this show is going to be very heavy breaking down that card because if there's one thing you know me and John like to do, it's break down stylistic matchups. So I think we're going to get into a lot of that. This past weekend, UFC Fight Night 233, we saw a massive knockout. We'll touch on Khalil Roundtree's big, huge victory. Would you consider that a huge victory? We'll get into that. I think it's against the savvy vet. Yeah, we will get into it. But without further ado, let's bring in the man that I'm going to get into all of this with. He was in Brazil this past weekend. It was hot down there by the equator, so I hear. You can follow him on Twitter if you want to hear all the episodes down there. John Morgan _MMA. He is John Morgan. What's up, brother?
I'm good, man. Fortaleza was a fun time. As you said, it was hot. But, yeah, man, look, you and I love talking about this sport. It could be any fight card coming up. I mean, we get excited about matchups no matter where they are. But when it's a UFC pay-per-view event, man, things just ramp up a little bit higher. You know what I mean? And this card from start to finish is stacked. I'm talking about from the first fight of the night on. So, yeah, I'm pumped up. I still got Atlantic City in between. It's going to be a weird fight week for me because I'm going out to CFFC, but I will be back on Saturday at T-Mobile Arena because I cannot wait for UFC 296.
Well, I'm glad you brought up how stacked this card is because I just want to quickly go down this. And we're going to talk about the main card, right? The main card. Opening up the main card. Vicente Luque versus Ian Machado Garry. I mean, both of these guys look fantastic in their last few outings, especially Vicente Luque in his last fight. I can't wait to see that fight. Tony Ferguson versus Paddy Pimblett. I'm sorry. I think it's a great matchup. You do. Yep. A lot of people don't, but I'm tremendously excited. Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. May have pissed off the UFC a little bit, but hey, number 5 versus number 6. It's a legitimate matchup here. I'm looking forward to that because I think Stephen Thompson poses a little more problems than most people are giving him credit for. The champ in the co-main, Pantoja, is taking on Brandon Royval. That is an exciting one. And then we got the big dog, right? Champion Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington. Oh yeah. And the featured prelim, short notice, Bryce Mitchell jumps up to take on who am I thinking? Josh Emmett.
Yep.
Josh Emmett, are you kidding me? That short notice, and I heard he got a new contract for that. Wink, wink.
Ooh.
But man, that is a hell of a featured prelim. And so it's the last UFC event of the year. They're stacking the card. I'm looking forward to it. Before we get into all of this, I have one question for you.
All right, let's hear it.
Outside of the main event, what fight are you most looking forward to?
On the main card? Because there's some great ones all the way up and down. Because, by the way, let me just say, Cody Garbrandt versus Brian Kelleher on the prelims. I mean, come on. First fight of the night is Randy Brown versus Muslim Salikov. I mean, there's even prelims we're talking about. But we talking about main card?
Yeah. I mean, let's just go whichever one you're. I mean, gosh. Menafield versus Dustin Jacoby. God, there's so many good fights.
Andre Feely's on there against Lucas Almeida. I mean, there's so many good fights in there. But if I look at
Jacoby and Menafield are early prelims. That's how stacked this card is.
I'm telling you, man, it's stacked with talent top to bottom. This is one of those cards you're going to watch all of it. But you know what, man? If we're talking about main card, I'm going to be honest with you. It's crazy because there's storylines in each one of these main card bouts. I mean, obviously, you got 2 title fights. Those are massive. I mean, anytime you have a UFC title on the line, that speaks for itself. You know it's going to be a great fight. We're going to talk about the other ones as well, but I'm just going to say it on the main card. This may sound crazy. I know people have been hating it. You and I haven't hated it, but Tony Ferguson versus Paddy Pimblett, man. I'm excited. This is as crossroads as it gets for Tony Ferguson, right? I mean, Tony Ferguson, you and I love that man as a fighter, love him as an athlete. Yeah. He's just an entertainer. He's a great guy, but he's had some losses, right? There's no questioning the setbacks he's had, but you look at who he's been facing. I mean, you're talking about championship tier individuals, right? Now you're taking a little bit of a step down. And I don't mean that as a disrespect to Paddy Pimblett's skill level. I'm not saying a step down in terms of where his talent level is, but he just doesn't have those accomplishments yet, right? He may be that guy, but we don't know if he's that guy. He came in with a lot of hype. He came in with a lot of flash. maybe had some performances. I think even Paddy himself has admitted, in going back in his most recent fight, at first he said he loved it. Now he said, you know what? Now that I've watched it back, maybe I didn't like it quite as much as I thought. It's just rife with storylines for me over where each of these guys actually stands in their career and what is going on, in their future. So for that reason, I know it may sound crazy because a lot of people when it's announced said, I hate this matchup. I thought this was brilliant matchmaking, and I'm fired up for it.
I want to break. This is one of the fights that I want to break down from a stylistic perspective. So we're going to table that right now, but I'm tremendously looking forward to that fight. But I keep on going back to this. And every time I bring up 296, I always bring up this Vicente Luque versus Ian Garry fight. And the reason is we know how good Ian Garry is. And we know how brash, and he's got the bravado. He's Conor McGregor 2.0 coming out of Ireland. He's got all of that. And he's got the skills to back it up. And then we look at a guy like Vicente Luque, right? He, coming off back-to-back losses. And then guess what? Then he fights RDA and looks absolutely spectacular. And it looked like, and he controlled RDA for all 5 rounds in that fight, right? It to me, it wasn't like it was competitive, but the outcome was never in jeopardy. And to say that against RDA, that is amazing. So I take that last performance and then I put it up against this young buck who is just like lighting the world on fire and touched in a lot of controversy right now. And I just look at this fight as one that could steal the show.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, man, for all the reasons you said there. And taking a look at the odds, I mean, it's crazy. You're talking about Vicente Luque at a plus 285. I mean, He's the guy with the track record. He's the guy with the experience. He's the guy that's fought that championship level competition. And, it's hard to factor in when you're breaking down X's and O's and you're talking about tactical game plans and all that. But you mentioned the stuff that's happening outside of the cage, right? All the controversy surrounding Ian Garry, his family, his wife, all the things that's being discussed. I mean, at the end of the day, once the cage door closes, a fist fight is a fist fight. But as well as anybody, man, the mental side of everything and where your focus is in the preparation ahead of time, where your focus is on the night of the fight. Are there distractions because of all the stuff that's going around you? Man, if you're going against elite level competition with Vicente Luque, absolutely is. One little slip up, one little change can affect everything. So what a way that is going to be to open up the main card for
Vicente Luque. I mean, well-documented like medical history, right? Has 2 losses. Then he comes back from all that, hadn't fought in forever, and then just like runs the table on RDA.
Unbelievable. I mean, that was a fight that we thought, like you said, maybe his career was hanging in the balance, right? I mean, and Vicente Luque came out and looked incredible and just said, like, man, I love this sport. Like, this is everything to me. Like, I wanted to prove that I still belong here and, that I deserve to be at this level. And he did exactly that against, one of the most proven competitors in the game in RDA. So this dude is a real deal. He's not going to buy into the hype of Ian Garry. I mean, he's not going to be distracted by anything that's happening around me. This just guy goes in there and handles business. So I think the odds on this one, Shocky. You always have to remember.
Well, they look at common opponents too, right? And that's you can't do that in because AB. You just can't do that in this game. Styles make fights.
Yeah, MMA math doesn't always work, right? A beats B, so B beats C. No, it doesn't all that. And look, and I get it with the odds as well. You're factoring in things like fan perception and popularity and all that, right? Because if a guy is popular, people are going to bet on him regardless, right? So, I mean, all that stuff factors into it. But it's in terms of pure competitive value of this matchup, those seem a little bit off to me. So I'm super intrigued by this fight. And that's why we say when this card is stacked, and we said it before, but I'm going to say it again. When there's fights that you and I look at, people who have watched thousands and thousands and thousands of fights, and you look at them and you're just like, I don't know. I could see A happening, and I could also see B happening. That's when it gets really, really intriguing.
So for all you bettors out there, which I'm not one of them anymore, right? But if one of you bettors out there, I will say, man, smart. If you want to take a flyer on a dog, Vicente Luque is the one to take because, man, everything that Gary's got going on, I don't know how much that's going to factor in the fight. I'm going to assume it doesn't factor into the fight. Even if it doesn't, based off of Luque's past fight, I put this as a pick'em. I think Vicente Luque looked that good against a veteran who is that savvy. And for him to not outclass him, but control everything in every situation and win in every single position, I put this as a pick 'em, just me personally. So that minus, I mean, what was it? 3 something you said?
360.
Yeah, minus 360.
Gary.
I think that's crazy. You want to take a flyer, that's the fight to take a flyer on.
I agree with you, man, because I look, pick them. Okay, I see what you're saying there, but I wouldn't have if I looked at this line and it was like
it made me like a minus 160.
That's what I say. If I saw Ian Gary minus 170, I'd be like, yeah, that's that new talent, man. He really looks like this. This is his moment to prove he is that guy that everybody thinks he is. Minus 170. That sounds about right to me. Minus 360, like, wow. And look, that doesn't mean that he can't go out there and dominate. He absolutely can.
No,
he can be that guy. But I just can't count a guy like Vicente Luque out of a fight like this. So I agree with you on that one.
All right, so I guess that was our way of breaking down the fight, even though we didn't break down the fight. We just kind of that's what I was most excited for. You're most excited for Ferguson and Paddy the Batty. But let's just go into one I think everybody's excited about, the big dog, right? 21-3 champion Leon Edwards versus number 1 contender, 17-3, Colby Chaos Covington. The gap has widened in the spread as well.
That's amazing.
Because last week we talked, it was like, what, a minus 120. I think it's in right now. What is it in right now? It's in at basically a minus 150 for Leon Edwards. So it widened.
I was just checking that. I'm actually surprised by that, to be honest with you. I thought it would shift more towards Covington because, obviously Covington, the pre-fight trash talk, everything that he does, the entertainment value that he brings. I think people are more fans. Whether I know some people don't like Colby, but I think a lot of people do. But he's definitely more of a polarizing type figure than Leon Edwards, who's a great fighter, but not necessarily a big braggadocio type fighter out there, making headlines and making waves with the things he said. So I kind of actually thought the line would shift towards Colby Covington. Now it's early in fight week. Maybe things will switch along the line.
Wait till Friday.
I'm a little bit surprised to see that. I think Friday, the casual money, right? The casual money really coming on Colby late. But I love this fight, man. This is a phenomenal fight.
So when really analyzing this fight, to break it down, we know the ground is Colby's, that's his area. And we know he's going to be exponentially better there. Now, whether he can get it there is another story because there is a distance that needs to be covered there. And that's where Leon Edwards is masterful. But I always go back to past performances, right? And so first off, do you want to, you're a journalist and you cover these guys. I don't know if you're in the position to make a prediction. Are you in a position of wanting to make a prediction?
I mean, look, I'm always going to lean one way or the other. So, I mean, I have no problem stating the way. And look, since I'm going to be in Atlantic City all week, I don't have to see him till fight night anyway. So I don't have to see him at media day. I don't have to see him at the press conference so easily. So I can. So if we want to break it down, or do you want my prediction now, or do we want to break it down first?
Well, I think the way I'm going to break it down is going to lend to where I think who's going to win. So,
all right.
Let's give a prediction and then explain why. After you give yours, I'll give mine. Then we can explain why we think in our analytic approach to this fight, why it's going to be that way.
Okay, so when I look at this fight early on, I say I think the pick has to be Leon Edwards for me, just because of how good Leon Edwards has looked. He's answered every question. The back-to-back wins versus Kamaru Usman, I mean, he has looked phenomenal. And again, I don't want to do it as MMA math. Well, Leon beat Kamaru beat Colby, so therefore, no, that's not how you do it. That's not how you break it down. But the excellent defensive wrestling that we saw in those matchups, I mean, look, he was losing the first fight with Usman. There's no question about it. But he wasn't getting absolutely dominated in the wrestling department. I think he's instilled with confidence right now. He certainly has the more power, the striking, the range. So I like Leon Edwards in this fight. But I say that with I like him, and I feel this is a 50-50 type fight. I mean, this is a fight that Colby Covington absolutely can win. And I think, whether you like Colby Covington or whether you hate Colby Covington, it's easy to dismiss his skills because of how much he talks and the things he says and his personality. But if you do that, you're doing it at your own peril, because that man's wrestling, that man's pace, that man's determination is unparalleled. And so he is absolutely in this fight. So I lean Leon, but I think it's an incredibly competitive fight, and I can't wait for it.
You were usually in lockstep, right? And
Right.
we are to a degree here, but I know when you say lean, it's in the slightest of margins.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I lean in the slightest of margins to Colby.
Wow.
And I just have to start breaking the fight down to explain my position.
Yep.
We know that Leon Edwards is a freaking sniper. You do not want to stay at range with that guy. When Kamaru was at range with him, which they spent a lot of time in range in their third fight, I guess, not their second championship fight. Right. Leon just really won every single exchange and he really did a great job of making that just patented jab of Kamaru's almost ineffective because he was countering it right away every single time. And then that, to me, made Kamaru a little hesitant in closing the distance. Okay? So he would, like you always say, or like when a lot of coaches say, it's like you have to be all the way in or all the way out. Living in that, that purgatory zone is when you start getting busted up. And that's where Kamaru Usman in that second championship fight, he kind of stayed there. Here's the difference. Is that I don't think Colby is going to stay there. Colby is for everybody says he doesn't got great strikes. And I'm not going to say he's got overly technical striking, but he does got good striking. But what he does is he will overwhelm you with strikes to get to close the distance, right? And I don't see Leon Edwards typically. I don't see Leon Edwards countering right away as somebody's flooring him. I've watched a lot of fights, and I don't see that out of Leon Edwards. I see Leon Edwards slipping, moving, changing angles, creating the perfect punch and hitting it. I just don't believe that Colby is going to allow him to do that. Colby almost took like a Chael Sonnen playbook. Chael Sonnen back in the day against Anderson Silva won. He just put his head down, threw wild punches straight into the clinch, and then eventually dragged it down. I don't even think Colby's got to drag it to the ground. I think Colby gets him up against the cage where he can effectively get those clean strikes, and Leon Edwards can't get those clean strikes. And I think Colby is going to live against the cage. I think there's going to be dicey moments. Colby always gets hit because he resets a couple times, takes a couple deep breaths. That's Leon's opportunities right then and there. But I just think that's a tall ask for Leon Edwards in the way he fights. He fights long, but he doesn't fight in a masterful, like wild counter striking when punches are coming because he's so great defensively there. Colby's wanting you to be defensive so he can close that distance, get him into the clinch, and then, you know what? Leon better be good at changing positions.
Man, you know what? That's why this fight is so exciting to me, because what you laid out there is 100% an absolutely realistic possibility, right? You're not asking anybody to fight outside of what they do or to do something that we've never seen before. That is who Colby Covington is, right? It's that volume striking. Like you said, do you expect him to land a clean right hand and knock out Leon Edwards? Like, no, that's not what you want to, that's not what you expect. That could have happened. It's a fight. Anything can happen. But just pure volume, pushing forward, pressing the action to the fence. Hey, maybe even a fight that's not necessarily the most exciting, if we're being honest, right? But just controlling and grinding away. And then what does that do to you physically? What does that do to you mentally as well, where you start to break, where you're like, man, I just can't get away from this dude. Why can I not get this guy off me? Why can I not get any space whatsoever? And it starts to break you. That can absolutely happen. That's a very, very real possibility. And that's why I love here. But, man, Leon Edwards, how do we just keep denying this man? How do we just keep doubting this man? How do we just keep questioning this man, right? He finds that way. He finds that will. I mean, the first championship fight, as you said, the second fight, but the first championship fight against Usman, he was losing that fight, right? He was moments away from losing that fight, and he found a way to get the one shot in. And what was amazing about that as well, right, was when you go back afterwards and you see the footage in the gym where the team had studied so well. They knew the tendencies. It wasn't, I think a lot of people saw that high kick and they were like, oh, man, what a lucky shot. And then you go back afterwards like, no. he practiced that exact same sequence because he knew the tendency and he knew the way that Usman would move. And so his team will absolutely have broken Colby Covington down. And you know what? There's a lot of tape on Colby Covington, man, because he's been in there for a lot of minutes in the cage, and they're going to know what to expect. And I can't doubt this guy anymore, man. I feel like I've doubted him on his way up. I feel like I've doubted in both these. But the scenario you laid out is absolutely true. And I think the question you have to ask yourself as well, like the second Usman fight, or the second championship fight, I should say, how much better did Leon look in that one? He looked amazing. But was maybe Usman not the guy at that moment? It was a pretty quick turnaround after the knockout. We know he was dealing with some injuries. We know he was dealing with some issues. So, are you putting too much stock in how good he looked there? So that's why this is so great, because I really think the scenario that you laid out is 100% realistic. I could see that happening, but I could also see Leon Edwards, this man that has fought his way through, the man that is buoyed by where he stands as a championship now, having that experience under his belt, being able to find that moment and find that spot. And look, Colby's been out for a while. Will the timing be a little bit off, right? When you've been away for as long as you have, he's starting to get a little bit older as well. So there's just so many things in this fight, but it's going to be fun. And that's just Saturday night. We're not even talking about Friday at the face-offs, Thursday at the press conference, Wednesday at the media day. I mean, the whole week is
I can't wait to see Embedded come out this week.
Oh my gosh, it's going to be fun, man. He is an entertainer. Colby and I have had our history with each other, and I've been the center of his entertainment value at some point, which isn't exactly always fun to be that guy, but you can't take away from him, man. He brings the show, he brings the entertainment value, and he brings the fight, man. He brings the fight. He's deserving of being in this position, and man, it's going to be a great fight. When there's a title on the line, and there's bragging rights on the line, and there's trash talk on the line, I mean, it doesn't get any better. This is phenomenal.
And I want to go back to that fifth and final round of the championship fight number 1 versus Kamaru and Leon. And Kamaru and Colby kind of fight the same way. Right. I do believe that Kamaru is a little more polished in all the areas, except maybe the ground control.
Right.
But I do think he's a little more polished in all those areas, especially sticking behind that jab, which is a Trevor Whitman trademark, and he's world class at it. Right.
Yep.
But Kamaru Usman changed the way he fought in that fifth and final round. It literally looked like he put it on cruise control, and he stayed at range with Leon Edwards. Ask Belal Muhammad if you're going to stay at range. I mean, up until that eye poke, he was kind of getting off where he wanted to against Muhammad, right? Yep. In that original fight. And that's where, and ask Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz was standing at range with him. Yeah, that fifth round kind of turned the tables, but Nate Diaz was taking a lot of shots, staying at range with him. That's not the spot you want to be in. So Kamaru Usman in that fifth and final round, I just think he was so overconfident. He was on cruise control, and he changed the way he fought. He wasn't sticking behind that jab and closing the distance. He stayed at range. I think that Colby, he won't do that. Now, where he does need to look out, where the biggest opportunity is Colby has his tendencies. Trust me, I've been studying this, right? Getting ready. When Colby throws these punches, he very rarely comes in with straight punches.
Right.
He comes in and he ducks his head, and it's this, but he kind of takes it off the center line every time he does it, right? Boom. And he's looping and he's coming in, and it's strictly to close the distance. And if he lands, great. If he doesn't, bam, he's in the clinch and he's where he wants to be. If something's coming straight down the middle or coming straight up, that's a dangerous spot for Colby to be in. And knowing what we know off the Usman fight and seeing back the training footage of them setting it up, you got to know that that's the game plan. I mean, listen, I'm not going to say I'm smarter than Leon Edwards coaches, because we know that ain't true in this game.
Nah, but you know what, man? You did such a great job of breaking it down. That's why I love your technical analysis, because it's spot on. Because I'm telling you right now, as you were laying out the scenario for Colby and as you were recalling that fifth round opportunity, I mean, I thought back to watching that fight and being in there, and you're 100% right. It was like Usman knew that the fight was in the bank, so let me just stay safe. Let me just stay safe and let me be out here. And it's one of those things. It's a weird thing, right? What do they always say about jiu-jitsu? Like your mind has to work backwards. When you think you should pull away, it's actually when you should push forward. It's always backwards. And it's the same thing here, right? For Usman, he felt he was safe, so he stayed on the outside. That's not actually where you're safe. Where you're safe with Leon Edwards is pressing in and working into the clinch. Now, you might not be able to get him to the ground, but he can't land those big knockout shots.
And it's a little more
100%
physically taxing. So he was tired at the time. He's like,
yeah, 100%. And you're right. Colby Covington is not good. Colby Covington has the gas tank to stay in your face for 25 minutes and to never take a backward step, right? The man never takes a backward step. He's going to press and he's going to create chaos, right? That's what he does. And so it made me think of that. And as you were explaining it, I was really starting to think, have I been thinking about this all wrong? Because you know what? You almost convinced me to switch. But it is those moments. It is those opportunities. It is the fact that I think Leon Edwards is going to feel that as Colby rushes forward, he can sit down on his punches, right? I think Leon trusts in himself and his takedown defense enough that if he gets my hips, I can battle out of there, right? Mm-hmm. I can dig my underhooks. I can get 2-on-1 and switch. He really does a good job of that. I think Leon trusts in himself enough now that he feels, even though I know it's coming and he's diving for my hips, I can sit down on my punches in those moments and I can reset. And I know it's going to be repeated over and over and over for 25 minutes. But he can shoot on me for 25. I only need to land one in those sequences. Right. And I know what's coming. I know the chin's going to be in the air. I know he's going to be rushing forward with punches, and it's going to be there. So, but it's got me excited.
And you know that head's going to duck. You know it. I know it's going to duck.
And so the knee's going to be coming up the middle. The uppercut's going to be coming up the middle. All that's going to be it's all going to be there. Oh man, it's got me excited because that's what's coming. That's what's great. There's some fights that are like, okay, this is going to be tactical and who's going to be on the outside and who's going to blink first as we sit and we work patience on the outside. That's not what we're going to have here. Colby rushes forward. He's going to create car crash after car crash after car crash, engagement after engagement after engagement. It's all going to boil down to, can Leon Edwards manage those engagements properly? Can he ensure that he stays upright? Can he make sure that he's resetting and that as those advances are coming forward, that he lands one of his big shots? Man, this is a big fight.
You're right. Colby has to be perfect.
Yep.
25 minutes, which I think his style lends to the ability to be perfect, for 25 minutes. He doesn't have to go point for point and be perfect that way. But your compelling point, Leon's only got to be perfect once, right? Or at least once to really turn the dynamic, because we have seen when Colby does get hit, that's when he can take a step back. Now we're at range. Bing, bang, boom.
And hey, let's talk about judging criteria as well, right? I mean, the judges now, right? They're really told, pick the most decisive moment of the round, right? So let's say Colby Covington is able to control the action on the fence for 4 minutes of a round, but somewhere in that extra minute where he didn't, he gets tagged once and he wobbles a little bit. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I think the judges would probably say, well, that guy controlled the action on the cage for 4 minutes of the 5 minutes. That's a Colby Covington round. But now, as you well know, as a licensed official, they're being told, hey, find that decisive moment, find that damage, find the one that could have potentially ended the fight. And so, now you're saying, okay, well, maybe Leon Edwards gets controlled for 4 minutes, but during that one, he lands 2 or 3 big shots and, Colby staggers just a little bit, recovers, but staggers. The judges can easily say, yeah, I award that. So, I mean, there's opportunities there as well, which goes back to exactly what you said. Colby has to be perfect, but the thing is, he has the ability to be perfect because he has a never-ending gas tank, and he knows exactly what he's trying to do. He knows exactly what his game plan is, and he doesn't care.
Giving people the game
That's
plan.
it. And he doesn't care. He's one of these guys. If he's controlling the action on the fence and the crowd is booing, do you think he's going to feel like, oh my gosh, well, I've got to put on a show for these people. I better back away and reset. Nope.
He knows exactly.
He's like, bro, I put on my show for you at the press conference. I put on my show for you at the media day. I put on my show for you at the ceremonial weigh-ins. Now I'm doing what I got to do to get paid. I'm trying to put that money in the bank. Boo all you want. You already bought your ticket. You already bought your pay-per-view. You're in the building.
It just, man, styles make fights. We always say that. And I just really believe the style of Colby presents a big problem. Disclaimer. I've said that against Leon Edwards' last few opponents. And he's kind of not made me look stupid because everybody picked Kamaru. But I mean, Leon has the it factor. He is, how they get, I don't know if you're old school, like basketball fan, Robert Horry, used to call him Big Shot Bob, right? Because he hit so many big shots in his career. This is like Leon Edwards is built for big moments. I've seen that. And this is a big moment. His first title of defense against, or in a while, named somebody not named Kamaru Usman, right? So it's his real first title defense outside of the opponent that he won it from.
Yep.
And like Joe Rogan always says, I love listening to Joe Rogan podcast. When you become a champion in the UFC, there's a instant 30% confidence boost that you have there, and you become a 30% better fighter. We saw that in Kamaru versus Leon 3 championship fight 2. I'm anxious to see if we get that, because if Colby does get in and right away he digs the underhook, pummels, turns, resets, I'm going to be like, oh shit, this is going to be wild now.
And look, and now you can, and this is what's so great about breaking this fight down. Now you can look at the fact that, hey, Leon Edwards is 32. Colby Covington's the older man at 35, right? And we've seen that stat that gets thrown out there about title performances of guys that are 35 and up, right? The record's not there. Mm-hmm. Then you look at the wins. Obviously, a lot of people point to Colby Covington. They point to the losses to Usman. Those were great fights, by the way. Those were spectacular fights. And, oh, by the way, that was peak Usman. There's no question about it. But you look at the wins, and it's easy to discount. And I'm not saying you should discount Colby, but it's easy to say, well, that was Masvidal that he beat at the end of his career. That was Woodley at the end of his career. That was Lawler at the end of his career. You know what I mean? There's all these things you can say, but man, unbelievable. And dude, I'll tell you what's funny is I didn't even realize it until I was down there in Fortaleza, Brazil last week, but I didn't realize Fortaleza was actually the city in which Colby Covington had the victory over Damian Maia and then called out the filthy animals, and they started throwing stuff at him. And oh man, it was just so funny to be there the week before this fight, to be back at the scene of the crime, so to speak. I actually interviewed him in his hotel room afterwards because he didn't even do any media because he was so willing to just sell to the crowd that the UFC brass was like, get him out of here, bro. Like, get him out of the arena ASAP. They ushered him back to the arena. He didn't do any post-fight interviews. He didn't do any media. They had to give him security to get to the airport because the Brazilians were out after him. I mean, it's amazing. This dude knows how to incite some hatred against him or what have you. But yeah, I'm so excited for this fight week. I'm a little bit like I'm sad. I love CFFC and I can't wait to get to Atlantic City and call those fights. My man CM Punk is going to be there, even though he's back in WWE. He confirmed he will be there. I hope I didn't mess up any WWE. I'm hearing things, but he should be there. But man, so I'm looking forward to that. But I'm kind of happy I don't have to be a part of this fight week because of the history Colby and I have had and how weird that is sometimes. I'm kind of happy I don't have to be a part of this fight week, but I'm also kind of sad I'm not going to be a part of this fight week.
You know what? Crazy. And I think Colby, long layoff, a lot of controversy. I think he was going to welcome you with open arms this fight week.
Get out of here.
I think he was going to say, John Morgan, I'm sorry. First question, go.
Yeah, well, I tend to disagree with you, sir. Oh man!
All right, so that's fight number one. I wanted to break down. I'm going to let you choose what fight we want to break down next. I hope you're going to go with the fight that you're most excited for.
Ferguson Pimblett. Let's go. Let's break it down because look, the flyweight title fight is phenomenal, man. That's gonna be a great fight. It's a rematch. That's a great fight. Shavkat and Wonderboy is phenomenal. I mean, Shavkat, the rising undefeated stud that everybody has anointed a future champion versus the gritty Wonderboy, the veteran savvy with the unique style that nobody else has out there. So that's interesting. But yeah, I want to hear what you have to say on El Cucuy, Tony Ferguson, and Paddy Pimblett, because again, I think we're in the minority that we're both really excited about this, and I think this was brilliant matchmaking. So I would love to hear what your analysis of this fight is. My analysis of the fight is I'm a Tony Ferguson homer, and I'm just hoping that he wins. Nothing against Paddy Pimblett.
Are you leaning towards Tony?
I'll be honest with you, I am, and that may sound wild, but I am leaning towards Tony Ferguson. And again, it is hard for me. I will admit, there's a lot of my homerism vibes in there. It's not that I don't like Paddy Pimblett. It's just if anybody's been around me for any length of time, they'll understand these guys that I've covered for like a decade. You know what I mean? Like, Cowboy Cerrone was my favorite fighter before he hung it up. Andre Arlovski is one of my guys that I cheer for every time he gets out there. It's just when you cover for somebody for a decade plus and you have all these interactions with them and all these interviews with them and you see them grow as a human being and have marriages and children and develop their life and all these things. I just don't know how you can't develop an affinity for them and want to see the best for them. And we know what Tony Ferguson has had to deal with, right? Paddy Pimblett's got an incredibly bright future and a whole bunch of years ahead of him, right? Tony Ferguson is towards the end of his career, and I want to see good things for him. But stylistically, I do think this is a fight that he has an opportunity to win.
I agree with you. I am leaning Tony Ferguson, and I think Tony Ferguson in his last fight actually looked pretty good, right? You know, who was he fighting? I just slipped my mind. Last fight
out was against Bobby Green, and then you had Nate Diaz before that.
He hurt Bobby Green every time he threw, right? If you recall. Here is why I lean towards Tony. I don't think Paddy's got the striking to knock out Tony. Now, Tony's at the tail end of his career. He's had some really bad KOs. So that chin might not be there like we saw it against, like, say, an Anthony Pettis or that one. Gosh, right? But I actually think this is going to get to the ground in some way, shape, or form, right? And Paddy is so good off his back, right? He can take arms, he switch position, take the back. And that's against a guy who will do traditional MMA jiu-jitsu with you. Tony Ferguson is not that guy. He is going to tax. I can tell you this. When these get into scramble exchanges, because that's where this fight is going to be won. For me, it's going to be won in the scrambles. And I think in maybe round 1, Paddy can win the scrambles. In round 2 and 3, I don't know. Paddy has a history of blowing up and then having to cut really hard down. We know that taxes your system. We know he's coming off of a major knee surgery. Okay? What kind of shape is he going to be in? I can tell you Tony's going to be in great shape. It's been well documented what great shape he's going to be in for this camp, right?
I mean, Tony Ferguson is always in great shape. Right. And then on top of that, you add in David Goggins and he's training with it. I mean, come on. So you're 100% right. I mean, look.
Really quick, I need to say this, though. Because Tony is a very unconventional MMA jiu-jitsu, he's inverting, he's rolling. If somebody's taking him down, he's dive rolling right away. And he doesn't accept that position like a normal, I'm going to get taken down and wrap up a guard. He's rolling and he's tumbling and he's doing all this weird stuff. And as you know, from wrestling or doing jiu-jitsu, trying to follow that and maintain control, it's hugely taxing. And that's where I think Tony is going to have the advantage in that. If we can see some shades of vintage Tony in that regard, I think this is a prime fight for him to win.
I think you nailed it spot on. I think that is why you and I have thought this was great matchmaking from the start, right? I mean, you look at the losses, because if you don't take the time to break down the technical analysis and you just say, wait a minute, Tony Ferguson, the veteran that's on this losing streak, against Paddy Pimblett, the rising star that they believe is going to be the future of the division, like, why are they putting this together? It's very clear the UFC doesn't like Tony Ferguson and they're trying to get him beat. No, you got to look into the styles of it. And I think you nailed it spot on. I mean, you look at, the loss to Justin Gaethje was bad, right? But Justin Gaethje's Justin Gaethje, right? Then Charles Oliveira, Beneil Dariush, those goes the distance, right? Then he has the nasty knockout against Michael Chandler, but looked pretty good, by the way, in that fight against Michael Chandler before he got taxed. The Nate Diaz fight happened, lost there, but that was a fight. He was supposed to fight Li Jingliang. Remember, that was that crazy UFC 279 week. And then you touched on Bobby Green as well. So, I mean, look, I don't think Paddy Pimblett is that, as you said, he's not that powerful. He doesn't have the knockout power that some of those guys have in there, right? He is kind of a grappler at heart as well. Like, that's where I know he has some knockout finishes, but I don't think he's that elite level knockout artist. And so because of that, I think this thing is going to be contested in the grappling department. I think this is going to be a grappling heavy fight. And you laid it out the scenario exactly perfectly. Paddy Pimblett does have a tendency to fade a little bit sometimes late. You add in the surgery, you add in the question marks, and you wonder where he's going to be at. Tony Ferguson doesn't fade late, right? That guy will go to the end. And, oh, by the way, he's stepped up his cardio even more with David Goggins. I mean, that's crazy. I think there's opportunities to win this fight late. I think this is a potentially winnable fight. Now, does Paddy Pimblett maybe come out and beat him? Absolutely can. I'm certainly not counting Paddy Pimblett out by any stretch.
He's so good, he can catch him in a submission early.
He absolutely can. Early. Yep, 100%. So I'm not counting Paddy. I love the matchmaking here because I felt like this from the time it was announced. When you break down the stylistic analysis of it, it's a competitive matchup. And that's all you can ask for right now at this point in Tony Ferguson's career, man. Tony is a legend of the game, man. He's paid his dues. He's such a unique character, man. He's just it's been a pleasure to cover his career. But this late in the game, what do you want? You want a competitive matchup that is potentially winnable. And I think that's what this is. I'm excited for it. I think it's a great fight. And I like his opportunities here. I really, really do. And I'd love to see it for him, man. I'd love to. The guy deserves it, man. As much as I'm kind of happy to not cover part of Fight Week, I'm bummed that I won't be able to cover. I love Tony Ferguson. He's going to come into media day. He's going to turn the chair around. He's going to sit down and he's going to say, "What's
He's going to have the ball in his hand with his gloves on.
I mean, he's the man.
With the best suit on.
Just such a unique character, man. I'll never forget, man. The Ultimate Fighter, coming off the Ultimate Fighter, his first media day, he shows up in a suit and sunglasses on inside at the Palms for media day, and I'm like, who is this dude? And he's been that guy ever since, man. And I love it. So I love this fight, man. I really do. And look, if Paddy, again, not counting Paddy Pimblett out whatsoever, and if Paddy wins, yeah, maybe Tony does have to have some conversations like, okay, I've been facing legends. I've been facing the top tier guys, and I came up short. Now I'm facing kind of the next. When you've been around so long that there's none of your contemporaries to even fight anymore, you know what I mean? You're facing that next generation. You got to start looking around a little bit. And if you say, well, turns out, man, I'm not able to. Father Time is unbeaten, right? That's the reality of this sport. Eventually, that new generation comes around, and you just don't have quite what it takes to keep up with them anymore. And if that's the case, then maybe he does have to start looking around. But this, to me, is all I could have asked for in the matchmaking for a Tony Ferguson fight.
I know we don't like to do MMA math, as you well documentedly always say, is MMA math doesn't make sense, right? I want to do some MMA math here. Really. Tony Ferguson fought Bobby Green last fight. Now he did get head and armed, but he was late in the third round. Right, of a 3-round fight in which we all said, Tony looked good in that fight. He hit, Bobby Green with some shots. He buckled his legs on a couple of occasions. Do you think Paddy could have done that to Bobby Green like Tony did? I think the last thing to go is that power, right? Yeah. He wasn't as nimble, and he wasn't this, and he wasn't that. And we didn't see him on the ground. But do you think Paddy could have buckled Bobby like that? I just don't know. I don't think so.
I don't think so, man, because I think about the boxing that Bobby Green has and the head movement and the shoulder rolls and he's been I don't think so. I don't think so. But I mean, a fight's a fight, and that's one thing we love. I didn't think Matt Serra was going to level George St. Pierre, right? But it happens.
I have a point with that, right?
Yeah.
And my point is I really think when he gets hit one time by Tony, he's going to be like, I need to close the distance. I need to get into a clinch. I need to get to the ground. And then that's where I think the Tony Ferguson, the unconventionalness is really going to pay dividends.
And all of a sudden you panic, shoot into a Darce choke.
Right. Or you do land a takedown, but on the way down, Tony's already setting up the triangle, or something happens in a weird scenario, and I see Tony Imanari rolling at least once in this fight.
He has to. I mean, come on. You know what I mean? It's not a Tony Ferguson fight if he's not coming out doing an Imanari roll at some point, right? I mean, that's
so for all those reasons, I'm still leaning Tony, and I just think that this is a fight that I think Paddy has to take to kind of erase the Jared Gordon fight. But it's a scary fight because in my opinion, there's no real upside for him in this fight. He beats a Tony Ferguson. He beats a guy who's on a 6-8 fight with skid right now. But I think this is a fight that poses him big problems stylistically. It's just a no-win situation for Paddy.
You're 100% right about that, right? Because I mean, again, the majority of people, you and I were in the minority, but the majority of people when this matchup was announced, they're like, "What are you doing? This is not right." So why did they say that? Because Paddy Pimblett, to him, it's like you got to go in there and you got to destroy Tony Ferguson in the first round, or all of a sudden people are questioning you again, right? I mean, they were questioning him after the last fight. Now they're going to question you again. Let's say, and that's kind of, I mean, that kind of sucks when you think about it for Paddy Pimblett, right? Because Tony Ferguson is a game dude, even at this point in his career. And if Paddy Pimblett like guts out a hard-fought decision win against Tony Ferguson, a lot of people that are Paddy Pimblett haters are going to be like, come on, man, this guy again, I thought he was the next generation. I thought he was the new guy. Now he's just, and it could be a great fight. It could be one that he shows his heart, he shows his character, and he guts one out, and people are going to say, you should have gone in there and destroyed Tony Ferguson. This is a guy that's on the backside of his career. You should have won this if you're that guy. So you're right. It's a no-win situation for Paddy Pimblett. And if he goes out there and does destroy Tony Ferguson in the first round, people are going to go like, yeah, okay. I mean, you were supposed to. Like, of course you did. I mean, Tony Ferguson hasn't won a fight in how long? So he's definitely in a no-win situation. And I tell you what, man, as you said, you and I don't really put any money on the fights, obviously, for legal reasons to do that. But, man, a little, just a couple bucks. I'm not saying, put a big investment, but how about just a couple bucks on a Luque Ferguson parlay? I mean, can you imagine what those things together would pay? And again, they're big.
Minus 340 for Pimblett and then minus 360. I mean, you're probably getting, plus $800 on those.
Can you imagine just a couple bucks on a guy like Luque and a guy like Ferguson, man? I mean, could be fun. Could Garry and Pimblett walk out with victories? 100% they can. You know what I mean? But that's why.
And they're favored too. I mean, that's why the huge odds. All right. So they're favored too.
But that's why we're loving this card, man. That's why we're loving this card. What a way to finish up the year for the UFC this is gonna be, man.
Okay, we got room for one more breakdown, right? I'm gonna lay it out, which I think we could break down. I think we can break down the featured prelim, right? I think we could break down, let's say Shavkat and Stephen Thompson.
Well, let me ask you what you're most passionate about. You were kind enough to ask me what I was most passionate about. I want to ask you what you're most passionate about, because you just laid out two good ones there. Like, granted, we know you've seen Bryce Mitchell on the come up. He's from the neighborhood, right? There's going to be some homerism for Bryce Mitchell, but you know his game as well as anybody. Meanwhile, Josh Emmett is that dude, right? I mean, he's an absolute stud. So I love that fight, and I love the fight that Bryce Mitchell stepped in there. So I'd like to hear that. But also, I'll tell you what, another – and maybe that's the way you go, because on paper it's the more competitive fight. But I don't want to brush off Shavkat Rakhmonov and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, because the odds there, Shavkat the huge favorite, understandably so, undefeated, finishes everybody, anointed as a champion. But Wonderboy, crafty, different, unique. So I mean, both those have my attention as well.
Okay, let's do this. We won't break down the Bryce Mitchell fight. Where I wanted to go is break down this Thompson Shavkat fight.
I love it.
But what I will say about Bryce Mitchell is that it's a wrap against Josh Emmett if he gets him to the ground.
Yes.
It's a wrap. But, and I know this firsthand, as a professional MMA fighter, this is going to sound weird. But Bryce Mitchell, and I know this firsthand, I know his coach very well, right? Bryce Mitchell does not like getting punched. It is a really weird thing of his, right? If he gets punched a couple times, like, he will not do striking for months and months after a fight, only grappling. And Emmett has the power to put anybody's lights out. Now, is he nimble enough to handle Bryce Mitchell, who plays kind of a wider stance karate style and then can dive in? I don't think so. But when one big shot hits Bryce Mitchell, all bets are off at that point, just because I know the way that Bryce Mitchell internally processes shots.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. And for anybody that, maybe is new to the game or doesn't understand what you're saying, I mean, there's very few people really like getting hit. Like, it's just something you have to deal with, right? Mm-hmm. But to your point, what you're saying is there are certain individuals, like there's some people, when they get punched, it just fires them up and they move forward and they're like, I got to hit you back now. Like, oh, I can't believe you did that to me. Like, now I'm getting you back. And there's other people that it changes them, right? And it changes their approach, and it changes the way, they move forward, and their willingness to commit and their willingness to engage and that sort of thing. And so, you're talking about a very realistic thing with certain athletes out there. And as you laid it out, Emmett touches you, man, that can be the end of the night. So I'm intrigued by this. It's a great fight. Props to Bryce for stepping in, though. You said he got paid for it as well. So that's good, man. He can add an extra double wide out there on the floor.
I'm friends with this manager, Matt Weibel. Right, I used to train with his manager, and we're friends on Facebook. And he says, "New contract, step up on short notice." Check. That's what he put a Facebook post on. So, anyways, I do lean heavily towards Bryce Mitchell in this fight, but round number 1 is going to be very interesting.
Yes, it is.
Very interesting.
Yes, it is. Love that.
So, let's go on. Shavkat, number 3 versus Wonderboy, number 6, I believe it is. Right. Where are you leaning? I'm going to come with a hot take here.
Okay, let's hear it. Because if I'm leaning, I'm just leaning Shavkat. I think he is that guy. I think he is a potential future champion. But I will just say it with the caveat that Wonderboy is one of the most unique athletes in the division and in the organization as a whole. And I just think he's one of those guys that, we talk about it all the time. And it's the truth, right? Styles make fights. And Wonderboy is one of those guys that you don't train. You don't train for Stephen Thompson on a daily basis. You've never fought somebody like Stephen Thompson for most of the people in the division. And so he presents very unique scenarios, right? There's a whole bunch of phenomenal athletes and a whole bunch of phenomenal fighters in the UFC, but there are very few that are truly unique specialists. And Wonderboy is one of those guys. And so I believe Shavkat is that guy. But I believe Wonderboy is also a unique problem for anybody he steps in with, and that's why I find this intriguing.
My hot take is I'm leaning towards Wonderboy.
Wow.
And here's why. The stance of Stephen Thompson, it looks like that leg is there to grab, but it's not. He is so smooth-footed, right? And his length is so long. And I'll tell you, against any other style, I'm a huge Shavkat fan. Like, I think he is he is who we think he is.
Yep.
Right? This is just such a perplexing matchup for him stylistically, because Rakhmonov, we know he's a great grappler, we know he's a great wrestler, we know he's a great boxer, but he is very traditional in all of them. And he's very great at all of them, but his boxing is very traditional. The way he's moving forward is very traditional. I think it's going to be really, really hard for him to close that distance. If we look in his last fight, Jeff Neal, we thought he was going to run through. Jeff Neal was a good boxer, good wrestler. It gave him problems. Yes, he did submit him late in the 3rd round, but that was a very tough fight when the odds were hugely stacked in Rakhmonov's favor in that. And the fight didn't play out as the odds said it would, right? And I'm not saying that to say Rakhmonov isn't that guy. I'm just saying that, like, Jeff Neal had a style where they were the same, they were both good. And each one we saw Rakhmonov was better at those traditional styles. Now it's going versus very traditional versus very unorthodox. And I think that's going to be a big problem. And I think you have to be willing to eat punches coming in. And a lot of the opponents that Wonderboy faces, they are all the way out until they come all the way in. And Stephen Thompson unfairly gets a rap sometimes that he's a boring fighter, but he's only boring because people are so scared to get in that zone where they have to either strike with him or grapple with him, because you have to get into that zone to grapple with him. So I say all that to say this. It's going to be very hard. Rakhmonov could say, screw it, throw caution to the wind. I'm going forward. I'm getting it. If he does, it's probably an easy fight. But I don't think, you have to really turn your brain off to do that.
Yeah.
And pretty much no opponent has done that with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson.
Boy, I tell you what, man, you said it. I'm starting with a hot take, and it is a hot take, but I'm telling you what, the way you rationalize it, man, it's not ridiculous, right? I mean, 17-6, and the one draw for Stephen Thompson, but 17-6, and of those losses, 0 by submission and only 1 by knockout, 5 decisions, right? So Shavkat better buckle in and be ready to go the 15 minutes, because he's going to have to execute that strategy throughout the full 15 minutes, because you're not going to make. I mean, you think about it, it's crazy. Since Wonderboy came into the UFC, he's one of those guys. It's like, well, dude, just take him down, bro. Like, I mean, he's a striker. He's not a grappler. Just take him down.
Yeah.
And nobody can. and nobody can. You know what I mean? Like nobody's been able to dominate him that way. I love it, man. I love it. I love the fact, and again, it just goes back to why we're intrigued by this, man. It's not, and I think you and I are that type of fan where it's like the names mean something. Like we get excited about seeing names. Like we want to see the superstars. But what we really like is intriguing fights, right? And when it's intriguing fight and a big name, now that just takes it up to another level. And that's what this card has, right? It's not just that you look at the 10 names on the main card and you go, like, that's awesome. I want to tune in and watch those 10 guys. You do. But it's the matchups that they each have. And you just laid out with this one is a lot more intriguing than maybe some people might like to look at. If you just take a cursory look at the odds, you might go, why am I even seeing this fight? This is a good one, man. And look, it could be the wily veteran and Wonderboy showing that he's still got something to tank, or it could be the coronation of Shavkat Rakhmonov to be like, hey, man, we've seen the guy. We thought he was the guy. He proved he is the guy. Now let's start getting him some contenders. So another big fight here, man. I love the fact that you're picking the upset.
And listen, if this was a 5-round fight, I would not have the same pick.
Ooh, good point. Yeah, great point. Great point.
Right? So I think that feeling out process in round number 1 is going to very heavily favor Wonderboy Thompson. I think that it's not going to be downloaded correctly and figured out until probably late second. So in that second round, you have to figure that out early and then start doing your work to be able to get a decision victory or a finish against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And that's a tall ask. It's a tall ask to do that. Go back and look at his losses. Do you have it pulled up? I mean, Gilbert Burns, Belal Muhammad are his last 2 losses. Then he came back and beat Kevin Holland, right? Yeah, Anthony Pettis a couple years before that, and Darren Till when we thought Darren Till was the next world champion. You know what I mean?
And a lot of people didn't like that decision either. A lot of people didn't like that decision either against Darren Till, and then Tyron Woodley as well when Tyron Woodley was that guy. So, yeah, man.
So Belal Muhammad, Gilbert Burns, Anthony Pettis, and Darren Till. Yeah, he's lost 4 of his last, 7? But that's. Those are big names, and nobody finished them. Oh, no, Anthony Pettis did. I'm sorry. Anthony Pettis did finish them.
Yeah, that was a huge highlight there. That's the one time he's been knocked out in his career. Meanwhile, I mean, look, the wins for Shavkat, Jeff Neal, Neil Magny, the last 2 times out, those are impressive submission wins, right? But then you go back before that, and now you're starting to get to, not the elite level. Carlson Harris, Michelle Prazeres, Alex Oliveira. Not to take away from those guys, but they're not that elite, right? Where you're fighting those championship caliber athletes every time out. So, again, this is intriguing. This is intriguing.
And just that long karate stance that on the catch, and Wonderboy. Feints are going to be if the traditional boxing of Rakhmonov is going to be utilized here, it has to be utilized in feints and a lot of them to close that distance. And in round number 1, virtually nobody has been able to figure out that puzzle. 2, 3, maybe, 4, 5, definitely.
Yep.
But early in that fight, it's hard to do. And in 3 rounds for this level of fighters, 15 minutes may sound like a lot to you and me, but to them, it's not a lot.
It's really not. It's really not at all. It's gonna be a great fight. This card again. Spoiled. I mean, you look up and down this thing, man. It's incredible what's on this card. I mean, you start looking down again. The Josh Emmett, Bryce Mitchell as the featured prelim is amazing. That Cody Garbrandt, Brian Kelleher fight could be a lot of fun on the prelims. A couple key women's fights there with Irina Aldana and Carol Hossa, Casey O'Neill, Ariana Lipsky could be great. And then the early prelims of the night, as you said, Alonzo Menifield, Dustin Jacoby, that could be absolute fireworks. Tagir Ulanbekov versus Cody Durden should be a great flyweight fight.
Menifield and Jacoby are going to go after each other. That's what those guys do.
That's it, man. This card, I really do believe this is going to be action-packed from start to finish, man. This is going to be a fun way to wrap up the year.
I love breaking down fights more than I like really recapping them. I love breaking down fights, and I'll tell you why. This is weird, and it kind of hit me. Is I think I'm so much better analytically at analyzing fights now that I've over the last maybe 4 or 5 years reffed at a really high level with serious caliber athletes and fighters, because now I've been in so many situations where I'm like, okay, this guy is moving left and he's countering he's moving left and he's countering with the right every time. Now I know I probably need to hurry to transition to this position. So I start seeing how the styles are mixing in the cage, and it's like, okay, now I need to go in this position because if A and B happen, I have to be over here to make sure I say C. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's weird.
That's a great point, man. That's awesome. In my two roles, obviously, I'm either sitting a few feet away at press row or even closer when I'm sitting cage side doing commentary. And obviously, I think the commentary helps a lot because you're talking about, especially the way, like Punk and I like to commentate. You're like, well, here's the adjustment I would probably be looking for to make here. Here's what I would be, you're kind of trying to figure out what they should be doing. So it's similar, but I love that observation you make because as great as of my seats have in either one of my roles, yours is even better. You're even closer to the competition, but I've never heard it laid out that because you're so right. Positioning is so key as a referee. Number one, just because you just don't want to get in the way, right? The last thing you want to do is have two people run over you and you look like an absolute idiot, but you're also trying to be as close as you can to make that stoppage if need be, without being in the way. And so you have to be very careful of where you are. And, we always hear about positioning, even if it's a stand-up fight, you're making sure you're on the right side so that you can see as much. So it's really cool to hear you say that. I've never thought about that, but you're absolutely right.
And the anticipation
exactly.
And the anticipation of where it's going to go. And that's why, being in there of 1,000 fights now, probably the ref is that okay, I see this and I see this. I've seen it enough to know that the probability is going to go this way.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool to hear.
Yeah. So, man, that's why I love breaking down fights, dude. And I'm just a student of the game, as I know you are. And gosh, man, it's been over an hour and we only talked 3 fights.
I love it. But it's so true, right? After fights, you talk about the storylines and what's next and what this means and how it impacts the division and all those things. And that's great. That's fun too. But man, it's that build up to the fight, right? How is this going to play out? What tactics should they take? What adjustments will there be? I'm the same way as you. I like to build that anticipation so that when they step foot in there, man, you get that little chill up and down. The hair stands up on your arms, and you get the little, can't wait to see what's about to happen, and then it does, man. I love it.
Okay, we're gonna revisit this next week, and we're gonna see. We kind of differed on a couple here. You leaned Leon, I leaned Colby. We both leaned Tony. Hot takes, I know, but we both leaned that way. You leaned Shavkat, I leaned Stephen Thompson. Hot take, I know. And we didn't say which way. We did talk about Bryce Mitchell, but which way do you lean?
I lean Bryce Mitchell. I do. The grappling game is problematic, man. He's really good at that.
Okay, and we both lean Bryce. So we'll come back next week, see how accurate we are, see if our breakdowns and listen, dude, we're batting 1,000 with breaking down fights right now on big marquee fights, right? We are batting 1,000. Not saying it's going to happen here in this Colby fight, but man, we've done a pretty good job. That's all.
I think we know what we're going to see. Again, that's what's great about that fight is I don't think there's going to be a lot of surprises in what we see. It's just going to be who can execute, and that's what's phenomenal. That's when you know it's high level, man. It's just who can execute. It's not easy.
And Leon hasn't been in the gym or hasn't been in the cage for a long time. Neither has Colby. But I think the amount of work that Leon has probably put in over versus Colby with all the legal stuff, I think that might pay dividends too. But if Leon comes out and shucks that clinch right away and moves back to the center, which I think is a realistic possibility too, because there's been so much gap in both of these guys fighting that I think huge strides could have been made.
Oh, and can you imagine the confidence builder that would be? Because like you said, you know what's coming. Can you imagine Colby rushes forward, he clinches, and right away, underhook, turn, disengage, strike?
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Can't wait.
All right, I'm fired up. UFC 296 T-Mobile Arena this Saturday night, December 16th. But on the 15th, you are going to be in Atlantic City for another primed Cage Fury Fighting Championships card. Tell us about it.
I'm telling you right now, man, it is a stacked lineup. We got 2 championship fights. The main event, Robert Wiley is putting his belt on the line, and then there's a vacant light heavyweight title. Luke Fernandez, former amateur champ, now looking for a pro title as well. It looks like a blue chip prospect, but this thing is loaded top to bottom, man. It's Atlantic City. It's a big building. It's the Hard Rock in there, and CFSC loaded this card with a bunch of really, really talented fighters. to end the year. By the way, ending the year in MMA, we still have college wrestling the following week and submission grappling at the end of the year. We got a busy CFFC schedule, but yeah, Friday night UFC Fight Pass. I'm telling you, tune in to this main card. It's going to be fireworks. My man CM Punk is going to be there. Yes, he's home in the WWE.
Allegedly.
At CFFC as well. Allegedly. I think maybe. I heard maybe. but I always look forward to working with him. So it should be fun.
Yeah, man. CFFC Friday night, UFC Fight Pass. Everybody check it out. The stars of tomorrow. You can see them today. I got one question about CFFC. When are we going to see Perez back in the cage? And will it be in CFFC?
Boy, I'm wondering about that. Jose Perez is a stud. I think he is destined for the next level. They are doing the Ultimate Fighter in his weight class, so maybe he'll get the cast on that. I don't know. If not, he needs to be in. He needs to be a contender. It's funny, man, because it's these guys that grow up in the CFFC. I tell them all the time, like, I love having you here, but I want to see you go somewhere else. You know what I mean? Like, you've earned that right. I think Jose Perez has earned that right. So I'm glad you point out his name, because as much as I would love for his next fight to be in the CFFC, man, I think it deserves to be a Contender Series, the Ultimate Fighter, or a major organization somewhere else.
So watch all the stars of tomorrow today inside the CFFC cage. I can tell you firsthand, they are a top-tier promotion that is the feeder. It's the feeder for the UFC now. It's either Dagestan or CFFC. Those are the two feeders to the UFC these days.
That's it.
So anyhow, well, for John Morgan, I'm Eric McMahon. Enjoy the fights.